Good evening. It is my honor and my privilege to welcome all of you on this convocation day of the Asian College of Journalism class of 2016. The Lawrence Dana Pinkham Memorial Lecture today will be delivered by Mr. N. Ram on the subject, What is Special About Investigative Journalism? A critical look at its precepts and practice. Today is a special day for another reason, and Mr. Ram's topic seems entirely appropriate for the occasion. We mark this day the inauguration of the ACJ Award for Investigative Journalism. Indeed, we begin this evening's ceremony with the award ceremony, and we have here on the dais a very distinguished panel of judges for the selection of the award winners. Very, very warm welcome to all of you here. After the award ceremony, we will proceed with a convocation special lecture and the presentation of the ACJ postgraduate diplomas to our graduate students, whom we would all like to congratulate heartily. All in all, we may look forward to a most enjoyable evening, so I request all of you to remain in your seats till the very end. Thank you.
Well, it's such a pleasure to see all of you again. The faces may change, and yet they remain the same in some sense. They are the expectant faces of our students and their parents and guardians from across India and beyond the neighboring states. Then there are the familiar faces representing a cross-section of the cream of Chennai's public and the news media, who have stood by us, been our steadfast friends, been unfailingly with us on occasions like this all these years. And then, of course, there are the confident, reassuring faces of our core and extended faculty, who constitute and define the intellectual resource, the pedagogic resourcefulness of ACJ. And finally, all those who have, defying this sweltering, muggy May evening, turned up here in response to our invitation. This year and this evening, as Sudha mentioned, we combine two events: the presentation of the first ACJ Award for Investigative Journalism and the convocation of the class of 2016, along with the Lawrence Dana Pinkham Memorial Lecture, which Ram will deliver. We begin with the award. At the ACJ, we have always had a sense of special claim, if you like, to the discipline of investigative journalism. Not because of anything we ourselves institutionally have accomplished in that field, but because one of our trustees, my senior friend and mentor, N. Ram, who is our key speaker this evening, epitomizes that form of journalism at its best. The investigation he led into the purchase of the Bofors howitzer guns in India in the 1986-87 period, and its political fallout made Bofors synonymous with investigative journalism in the Indian media context. So we have this reflected glory to live up to, and have been thinking of ways to make investigative journalism an important feature of our program at the ACJ. And one of the ideas we have been considering is to set up a center for investigative journalism, which, apart from imparting the skills of this very specialized genre, provides valuable research and reference material and contacts for those pursuing investigative stories. We have instituted the ACJ Award for Investigative Journalism as a first step in that direction. And, or even more importantly, the award is a recognition of the growing importance of investigative journalism in the emerging media ecology, when journalism itself is being constantly redefined and reinvented in the digital churning of the news media, which combined legacy mainstream media, online and social media into an interactive multimedia mix, the emphasis and priority seem to be on investigative journalism. It is this strand, or type, if you want to distinguish it as one, that seems to be at the forefront and racing ahead, as we see now from the traction and buzz that digital first or digital only and digital video ventures taking to investigative journalism, like, to name a few, Vice or Vox, are creating out there in cyber and social media. Investigative journalism, it seems, is the buzzword in the new age of journalism. The tried and tested methods of rigorous investigation and verification, etc., continue to be as relevant in the new as in the old journalism, as the Panama Papers exposed by the ICIJ now remind us. And so, the awards for investigative journalism by the ACJ couldn't have been more timely. Matching the newfound youthfulness of investigative journalism, we have had the fortune of having as the convener of the awards committee a young, strapping academic investigative journalist himself, Nikhil Kanikal, who in fact has specialized in investigative journalism in his postgraduate studies at the Columbia School of Journalism in New York. And he teaches an elective on investigative journalism at the ACJ. So he has in fact been pivotal in putting this process of the first journalism ACJ Award for Investigative Journalism on its track. I would like now to, I'm sure he will introduce you, take you through, pilot you through the award itself, the process, introduce you to the distinguished members of the jury, to whom I owe great gratitude for having so willingly acceded to our request to evaluate this first and decide the winner of this first award. And they did that work with great finesse, and at least from the distance of Chennai, where they were deliberating in Delhi on a video bridge with Mr. George in Bangalore, it looked all very effortless and very, very quick. You'll have the results in a very short while. And to carry this forward, I invite my young friend, Nikhil Kanikal.
A very good evening to one and all. Thank you, sir. I'll just pick up where you left off and briefly introduce the award and the jury and the nominees. The definition of investigative journalism adopted by the ACJ and the Media Development Foundation was a fairly wide and liberal one, and we cast our ambit over a wide variety of journalistic work, including stories on the abuse of public office, environmental degradation, human rights violations, financial fraud, corporate mismanagement, gender-related violence, political apathy, war crimes, and much more. The judging criteria included the reporting and nature of the investigation, its presentation, its impact, and the extent of public interest. The ACJ and MDF decided to recognize the best works of investigative journalism on account to act as a catalyst and inspire more journalists and editors and newsrooms to pursue investigative work of this nature, and in the process raise the standards of journalism and contribute to the public interest. In the inaugural edition, we're happy to note that in the print and online category, we had 111 entries, which were reported from 64 locations from 46 news outlets in 8 languages. I would now like to briefly introduce the internal jury composed by the ACJ to first shortlist the vast number of entries that we received, and then placing the entries before the final jury. So very quickly, most of you are familiar with these people. Nicholas Nugent spent much of his career working for the BBC. Unfortunately, he's not here this evening. So Nick Nugent spent much of his career working for the BBC, including as an Asia-based reporter. He was the editor of the BBC radio program South Asia Survey. Since leaving the BBC, he has been a trainer and consultant on journalism and broadcasting in many countries. Currently, he teaches the television stream students at the ACJ. He is the author of several books, including a biography of the late Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi. V.K. Raghunathan is a former journalist with the Hindu in Chennai and the Straits Times in Singapore. He was also India correspondent reporting from New Delhi for the Straits Times. He is now associate professor at ACJ, teaching reporting, editing, and newspaper production. Srikumar Menon has a master's in English literature from Bangalore University, doctoral work in comparative literature at New York University, and a master's in international affairs from the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. He has taught writing and composition at NYU. He has also done research in international business in economics at Lehman Brothers. He is currently the head of the print stream at the ACJ. Kalyan Arun has been a journalist for more than 40 years with experience in print and television and writing for digital media. He has been in the Faculty of Journalism of various departments in institutions in Chennai, including the University of Madras, as part-time professor. He currently trains students in new media. Stephanie Shapiro was a reporter at the Baltimore Sun for 23 years and has covered stories in Japan, China, the Philippines, India, Indonesia, Cuba, France, Mexico, and Canada. She is the author of Reinventing Literary Journalism, Mythic Cycles in American Literary Journalism. From October 2013 to May 2014, Shapiro was a Fulbright Nehru visiting lecturer at ACJ, and she has since returned to the college twice to teach feature writing and literary journalism. Bindu Bhaskar is a professor and former Dean of Studies at the Asian College of Journalism. She has worked as a senior journalist for Frontline, the Times of India, and the Economic Times. She has worked in the US as an International Journalism Fellow. She has also authored a book titled My Vote Counts, and her essays on the Indian media have appeared in select academic volumes. So this shortlist jury brought the 111 entries down to the top 30, which we presented to the final jury, whom I will now introduce. As the chairperson of the jury, we have Leela Seth. Justice Leela Seth is a jurist, author, and policymaker. She served as the first woman judge on the Delhi High Court and is the first woman Chief Justice of a state high court in India. She has also been on the Law Commission of India and more recently on the Verma Committee on Sexual Offences. She is the mother of 3 children who are well known for their own work: writer Vikram Seth, peace activist Shantum, and filmmaker Aradhna. TJS George is a journalist, author, biographer, and educator. He has held several positions in journalism, including at the Free Press Journal, the International Press Institute, the Far Eastern Economic Review, and the Searchlight. He was the founding editor of Asia Week magazine in Hong Kong. He is currently the editorial advisor at the New Indian Express. In 2011, he received the Padma Bhushan for his contribution to literature and education. He is the author of many books, among them being Lessons in Journalism, The Story of Poth and Joseph. We now have Ms. Mrinal Pandey, who is a journalist, television personality, author, and administrator. Till 2009, she was the chief editor of the Hindi broadsheet daily Hindustan, after which she was appointed chairperson of the Prasar Bharati Corporation. She has previously worked for Doordarshan and Star News. She received the Padma Shri in 2006. Her most recent book is The Other Country, Dispatches from the Mofussil. Next is Mukul Kesavan, who is a historian, novelist, social commentator, and educator. He teaches social history at Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi. His writings have appeared in The Telegraph, Cricinfo, Outlook, Mint, and other publications. He is also the co-editor of Civil Lines, the widely respected journal of Indian writing in English. With this, we'll move to the nominations that have been narrowed down by the final jury to the top 4. We would like to first invite our students to honor the members of our jury for being here with us this evening. And with that, we'll move to the nominations. The first story in this category is Malini Subramaniam's Ground Report, The Truth About Chhattisgarh's Recent Maoist Surrenders, published in Scroll in December 2015. We then have Krishan Kaushik's Doing the Needful, SR's Industry of Influence, published in the Caravan magazine in August 2015. Next is Lilitha Vachani's Inside Job, The Woman Who Was Sacrificed to nab Raj Rajaratnam, published in the Caravan magazine in November last year. And lastly, we have Sohini Chattopadhyay's Inside the Fellowship of the Relentlessly Positive, published in Grist and Yahoo Media in February last year. I now call upon the chairperson of the jury, Leela Seth, to announce the winner.
Friends on the dais and friends, young and old, in the audience. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Media Development Foundation and the Asian College of Journalism for setting up an award for investigative journalism. Today, when democracy is in peril everywhere, the media has an important role to play. It is truly the fourth pillar of democracy, though not constitutionally acknowledged like the legislature, executive, and judiciary. It is trite to say that it is the duty of the media to unearth the truth so that we have a just, equal, and corrupt-free society. With the danger of paid news and many other problems, investigative journalism is the need of the hour. There is a hunger among people for the content. I can tell you that I was riveted by some of the entries that we examined. I'm amazed at the courage of many young journalists who are willing to stick their necks out and trace the truth, despite personal harassment. May they grow from strength to strength, and I salute them. They are our hope. I feel privileged to have been part of a jury with such eminent journalists as T.J.S. George and Mrinal Pandey, and an excellent academic and writer like Mukul Keshwan. Naturally, the interaction was both interesting and lively. The difficulty of comparing essays, long and short articles, short digital pieces, and newspaper series was apparent. Also, the difficulty in what each person thought what constitutes investigative journalism. The four of us discussed in detail, 3 of us in Delhi and 1 in Bangalore on Skype, and thought whether why a particular entry was strong. We looked at the content, the language, and the presentation, the public intent and interest and impact, and the actual investigation involved. Despite differences at various aspects, we did our best and arrived at a decision amicably, without rushing to the well. So here it is. Lilitha Vachani's Inside Job, the woman who was sacrificed to nab Rajaratnam. This was unanimously chosen for the first ACJ Award for Investigative Journalism. The jury was struck by the excellence of her writing and the poignant yet unsentimental recreation of the tragedy of an illiterate woman used by powerful men. Lilitha Vachani's great achievement is how she tracked down and introduce to the reader a person whose identity had been stolen for profit in America and who had then been abandoned to obscurity and destitution in a remote village in West Bengal. Her tenacity and imagination in taking what seemed like the loose end of a high-profile prosecution and teasing it out into a moving parallel of greed and stoicism makes her a worthy winner. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Since, unfortunately, Nilitha Vachani can't be here to receive the award, the executive editor of Caravan magazine, Vinod K. Jose, has agreed to be with us this evening, and I request Vinod to please come up on stage and accept the award from the jury. Ms. Vachani is currently in New York, and however, she's sent us a video message through which we'll play out for you in a bit.
Thank you, the senior colleagues in my profession and the junior colleagues in my profession. I think it's a great calling to be, in many sense, feel for the conscience, for truth and justice, and I think the calling to be journalist is exactly that, and ceremonies and approvals like this are sort of validations for what our roles are, and I think from Caravan, and I'm also happy to see 2 Caravan stories in the list of the finalists of 111 entries, and I think it's a matter of celebration for what we often call our guerrilla team of journalists at Caravan. But I think the fundamentals what we draw are the same fundamentals which are getting all of us here today evening, and more than the writers who have won this award, I think the crowd that I see here, the young journalists, they will go on winning many such awards like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinod. So the award comprises the trophy, the citation, and a 2 lakhs cash prize. We would now like to invite Mr. T.J.S. George to speak on behalf of the jury and share the experiences that went into this decision-making process.
I'm supposed to tell you about how the jury went about its business. Well, the jury went about its business in a state of high confusion. Until the last day, when suddenly, miraculously, everything fell into place. Looking back, I think that confusion was inevitable. See, normally, juries are made up of odd number of members, 3, 5, 7, and so on. In our case, we are a jury of 4. Now, a jury of 4 is an invitation to disaster. Because in case of a vote, there can be a 2-by-2 division. And division means no decision, deadlock, delicacies, problems. To this day, I have no idea why the authorities decided to have a jury of 4. Maybe they figured that the chairperson is a distinguished judge and her rulings will keep us under control. Or maybe they figured that we are 4 highly civilized persons and we will see that everything is very rosy and very comfortable. As it happened, 3 of us were highly civilized persons The odd man out, me, turned out to be troublesome from the start, shooting off emails and creating all kinds of doubts all around. But later on, to my satisfaction, I found that the others were also secretly sharing the same doubts. Now, what were these doubts? They involved the very definition of investigative journalism, or IJ as I call it. I followed the traditional definition. Investigative journalism is reporting that exposes, in the public interest, facts that would otherwise remain hidden. Under this definition, I thought half the entries that we had would not qualify. But then I also felt that there must be something wrong in my approach to that kind of a definition. Maybe it's unfair, maybe it is too hard, maybe it's too restrictive. Mukul Kesavan came to the rescue with a more practical, more liberal definition of investigative journalism. He said, any story that through research, field visits, interviews, and digging around tells us something we didn't know before is investigative. Simple, very clear-headed, very much to the point. Why didn't I think of it earlier? I know professors are far more clear-minded than journalists. Later on, Leela Seth made it simpler still. She said, investigative journalism is bringing significant wrongdoing to light. Bringing significant wrongdoing to light. 5 words. In 5 words, she summed up what the rest of us have been doing in 20 and 50 and 100 words. Very much to the point. I couldn't help feeling that judges are more clear-headed than professors and journalists. So now we knew how to judge the entries, but allotting marks became an impossible task. There were 4 categories, as he mentioned earlier, and we were supposed to give marks, each category having 25 marks with it. I really didn't know what to do. But feeling obliged to somehow give some marks, I quite arbitrarily filled in some figures, knowing all the while that I was doing something that made no sense. Mukul said honestly, I haven't been able to assign marks because I have no plausible rule of thumb for judging impact or public interest. Leela said, I have been struggling with giving marks in the format printed, and now I have given up. Mrinal handled it best. She just ignored it. Marks, what marks? That was her approach. Very wise lady. Now, this was the mood in which the jury held its meeting. Each one of us came up with a list of our preferences. Leela had 6 names in her list, Mrinal had 5, Mukul had 7, in no particular order, he said, and I had 4. Interestingly, the winner's name appeared in all the lists, in 2 lists as the first choice. In the other 2 lists, by putting the winner in the lower rungs of the ladder, somehow they helped us have a sense of perspective. As one of them put it, this is essentially a human interest story, which does not break new ground. But it does tell us something about the way the poor are used, their stoicism, and the cynicism of headline hunters, and that's interesting in itself. I think that kind of an approach clinched the issue in favor of the final choice we had made. But you can see we had our differences over the nominees. only a brief discussion was necessary to reach a conclusion unanimously. One last point. In spite of all our differences, I think the jury was able to function well and smoothly because of the very quiet and efficient supervision given to us by our young convener, Nikhil. It's a pity we don't have an award to give him. But with the permission of the jury, I would like to give him our very sincere thanks and our best wishes. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. George. We will now play a message from Ms. Nilita Bachani, which she has recorded and sent us from New York, where she's currently based.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this great honor. I wish I could be there in person, but I'm delighted that Caravan's editor, Vinod Jose, is there with you to accept the award on my behalf. I just wanted to say quite honestly that I didn't ever think this story would see the light of day, certainly for several years. I first met Manju Das in the summer of 2011. While the insider trading trials were still ongoing in New York. And that's why her employer, Anil Kumar, had sent her back to India literally a couple of weeks after his arrest in October of 2009. As we discovered subsequently, he had engaged in huge identity theft, using his housekeeper's name to stash away millions of dollars in offshore accounts, money that he got illegally from his friend Raj Rajaratnam for giving him tips on McKinsey's clients. It was very expedient for him to get rid of Manju Das. And so after working with the family for 11 years, she found herself suddenly back in her village in West Bengal. So I went looking for her, thinking this would be a remarkable story, but I didn't even understand how remarkable it actually was, because Manju Das turned out to be a poor and uneducated woman who had no idea of her role in insider trading. She had no idea why she had been sent back home. She had no idea how her employer had been using her name. And so I found myself in this incredible situation where I had all this information, and she, who on paper was a multimillionaire, had no information at all. And at that point I was wanting to make a film, because I'm a documentary filmmaker, and as I was working on the idea of making a film, I realized that what I was embarking on was possibly a dangerous enterprise, and it might actually hurt her, because clearly there were players in the field who would not want her found. It would be incredibly inconvenient to have Manju Das's story be told. So it took me 2 years, 2011, 12, and 13, for me to gain her trust, for her to realize that I was not going to do some kind of sting operation and, tell her story and then have the media at her doorstep. She started trusting me because I stayed very low. I did visit her once a year. I stayed in touch with her on the phone, but I made no attempts to tell her story. But yet, of course, the story lived within me, and the situation kept changing because the insider trading trials ended. Her employer, Anil Kumar, testified a year later in Rajat Gupta's trial. He got off with a plea bargain, because of the plea bargain, with a 2-year probation and a fine. And so at the point when it seemed that justice, the way it would have run its course, had run its course, I felt again that her story must be told. That's when Caravan came into the picture. I met Vinod Jose in New Delhi, and this was just last year. And he immediately saw the value of the story, was totally on board, and also worked with me so that we could keep it very quiet until I was ready to tell it. And then in the story came out together in India and here in the States. It was brought out by The Nation here. The story came out and it immediately went viral on social media. And I literally got hundreds of letters of support. People who sought me out on email and wrote to me, telling me how moved they were by Manju Das's story. It is, in my view, a story of gross inequality and injustice at a global scale. When I started getting these hundreds of letters of support from around the world, people actually offered. They wanted to do something. And they wrote to me saying that while nothing could ever actually take care of the injustice that had happened in this case, that people could contribute some amount of money and we might be able to make a difference to Manju Das's life. We came up with 6 lakhs for her, which I went and gave to her earlier in April actually. And so, before I end this, I just wanted you to meet Manju Das. And so I've filmed a little snippet of her with her son and them telling you what the story has meant to them.
अभी हमारा बेटा भी बोल रहा है कि तुम इतना तकलीफ उठाया और वो मेम साहब इतना मदद कर रहे हैं, तो जो हमारा पैसा से ज़्यादा है जो इतना कहानी इतना आदमी सुन रहे हैं, आपको भी जो इसीलिए बोल रहे हैं कि आप इतना किया, इसीलिए वो लोग
हम लोग तो चाहते ही नहीं है, हम लोग तो চাইছিলামই না এটা হোক। আপনি এটা যে করেছেন তো মার নামে যে এত দুর্নাম ওখানে রটেছে, অথচ মা এইসব কিছুই জানতো না। এই যে আপনি যে জিনিসগুলো আমাদেরকে জানালেন, 5টা লোককে জানালেন, সত্যি খুব ভালো হলো। মানে যে জিনিস মা করেইনি সেই জিনিসকে নিয়ে এত মানে মার নামে এত কিছু অন্য জায়গায়, অথচ মার নামে কিছুই নেই। মানে ওনার ওই সম্পত্তি ওনার নামেই রাখতো, যে মার নামে কেন এইসব সব জিনিসগুলো করলো। আমার তো মা যেটুকু স্যালারি পায় সেটুকু নিয়েই শান্তি।
कभी कभी दुख होता है, इसीलिए कि हम इतना साल तकलीफ उठा के भी हम लड़का के लिए कुछ कर नहीं पाते। ये किया एक माँ के लिए जो कितना तकलीफ होता है वो एक माँ जानता है। आपको पता होगा जी, एक बच्चा को छोड़ के जब दूसरा बच्चे को देखभाल करता है, खाना खाता है, और हमारा बच्चा अपना इधर खाना नहीं मिलता है, किसी का घर में रहता है, तो उसको कितना तकलीफ होता है। हम जिन मतलब 30 साल तक 25 साल तक रो रो के कितना हुआ कोई किसी को पता नहीं होगा, एक माँ को पता होगा। जिसका बच्चा वैसे छोड़ के काम करता है उसको पता है कि हाँ कितना तकलीफ हुआ। अपना बेटा को भी उतना पता नहीं है कि हम कितना तकलीफ उठाया और कितना आंसू बहाया, लेकिन क्या करें, अब पैसा के लिए किया। इसीलिए हम चाहता है जो भी हुआ भूल जाता है, और हम जो उतने दिन जिंदा रहे, हम जैसे पहले था सच्चा अभी भी वैसे ही चाहता है। हम किसी को ज़बरदस्ती जो प्यार करता है तो ठीक है, जो प्यार नहीं करने चाहता है ज़बरदस्ती प्यार मिलता नहीं है। आप जितना किया खुशी से किया हमारा लिए। अगर आप चाहता है कि नहीं हम नहीं करेंगे तो आपसे हम छीन नहीं सकता था।